So here's a quick, interesting little technique for using text and mask in a pretty creative way on the subject I've got here. You can see it's already extracted from the background. I went ahead and used the new Refine Edge in Photoshop CS5. That is, of course, a whole other tutorial, and you can certainly find more information on that. But you can see it got me a nice extraction of the subject and everything. And it's up against a white background. So now what I want to do to this image is actually go ahead and make it a black and white. I just want to convert it, or basically take all the color information out of here. So with my default color set in the toolbar, just press the D key on your keyboard to set black and white here on the toolbar. Then I'm going to go under the image menu to adjustments and then choose gradient matte. And that's going to make it a black and white image. We'll go and click OK. And I'm going to basically do a quick little thing to blow out the highlights a little bit more on this subject. And I'm just going to use a quick levels adjustment. So if I go under image adjustments and choose levels, I'm going to take the white eyedropper tool here inside the levels dialog and then go inside and find a lighter gray area on her skin here and just click on it once, and you can see it forces a lot of that area to white. And if you add other areas to it, you get a little bit whiter there. I'm going to actually take the slider and push it even more to boost that contrast up, because I'm really going for that really kind of blown out highlight look there. I think that looks pretty good. Want to be careful not to darken out the eyes too much, because if you go too dark, it's just going to look like that, and that's just kind of scary. So we're going to boosting that contrast a little bit, and then there we have it. Now, I'm going to scale this image and kind of place her a little bit differently in the overall composition here, and then I am scaling it up ever so slightly. You can get away with that to a degree. You also want to be you do want to be careful about scaling an image up too much, because you'll start to get some resampling going on, and then start to lose quality in the image there. So be very careful with that. So place this right about here, and I'm going to introduce some text in here to do some rather interesting stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my text tool, click right here into the document, and I'm just going to set, let's do the word Vegas, assuming we can spell correctly. Let's move that out here. Go ahead and fill it with red, and I'm just going to go ahead and scale this up a little bit. Now, my formatting is already set from the last time I set this, but if you double click and highlight the text on here and go ahead and open up the character panel, you'll notice that I've got the tracking in here set to -60 to close in the space between those letters, because I almost want them touching to form more of a bigger shape. In fact, I'm going to close in the spacing between the E and the G here. So if I just place my cursor and just tighten up that kerning, I'm just going to hold down the Option key and then hit the left arrow, and that's going to close that in a little bit more. Because we're going to use this lettering to encompass the image of this girl here. So I'm actually going to put it in free transform by pressing Command or Control T. Then I'm just going to simply rotate it around and putting it at roughly the same angle that the girl is standing. And we're going to fill in the image as much as we can. Now I'm holding down the Shift key as I'm scaling this text up to maintain its original proportions and positioning this to where it fills up a fair amount of the image. We can still tell what it says, but we're going off to the edges here. And what I actually am doing here, up here in the eyes, I'm actually getting to where her eyes are in the middle of that V, because we're going to show those through in just a minute. But we can still make out that this says Vegas on the overall poster. So once that's in position, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And in fact, let's go ahead and nudge that image up a little bit. Just like that. There we go. So the text is in place and our subject is in place. What I'm going to do is actually make a duplicate of this layer containing the girl, and I'm going to turn off the original for the moment, and let's take that duplicate layer and place it above the text here in the layer order, in the layers panel. So the girl's above the lettering there. So I'm going to go ahead and change the blend mode of this layer from normal to multiply. It's going to darken the area inside of the text there. And to isolate that part of the image, or this layer inside of that text, I'm just going to use a clipping group. I'm just going to hold down the Option key on Mac, that would be Alt on Windows, put my cursor between those layers, and then click once, and it's going to clip that image inside of that layer. And you can see, we can see the eyes if I need to readjust it just slightly. So her eyes a little bit more in view there. That looks pretty good. Well, I'm going to turn on the other layer, and now you can see the other subject underneath there. Now, the reason why I like to have both of these on their own layer is that this one beneath, I can actually drop its opacity down to about 50%. And it's more of a ghosting or screen back version of the subject in the background, and yet she's maintaining high contrast here inside the lettering. That's because of this version up here. So we're getting a really interesting look of building the same image on top of itself, but we've got that that text sandwiched in between there to give us a very interesting result. And what we can do is even take it further by applying a layer mask to that text layer, and then perhaps just getting a simple gradient. We're going to use a radial gradient going from foreground to transparent here, and then just come in from the outside of the text and just give it some variation by drawing in some of that masking. Now, my one layer is a little off here, so let's go ahead and line that back up with our text so we can see where the text isn't lining up there. There we can go. Get it lining up with our subject. It's probably a good idea when you move one layer to move them both. In fact, a cool way to do that, I'll show you real quick. So it's lined up pretty good now, but if you wanted to move these two layers, even though there's a layer in between them, this text layer, select one layer and then just Command or Control click on the other layer, and that'll select two layers that are not next to each other. Ordinarily, you'd hold down the Shift key, but in this case, you just hold down the Command or Control key, click another layer and select it, and you can move those two layers together, even though they're not next to each other. So, just a few tricks to get you thinking about text and images in a different way, and the way you can use layer masking and clipping groups to create a very interesting layout just using a couple of different images. Very cool.